Hi, everybody. I hope that you are enjoying BodCon today. My name is Danny, also known as I'm a Pound Cake Online. You're in for a special treat today. We're going to be talking about diet culture, weight loss, and wellness explored. You're going to love this panel. We have some amazing speakers today. I want to introduce you to our first panelist, Dr. Joshua Wolrich. He is an NHS doctor and registered associate nutritionist who is passionate about challenging spurious health and nutrition advice. He follows health at every size approach and leverages social media in order to fight against weight stigma and highlighting the need for healthcare to become health inclusive, weight inclusive, excuse me. Next, we have Esther Tambe. She is a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and educational specialist. She is the founder of Esther Tambe Nutrition LLC and co-founder and executive director of Fight Through Fight Through Flights Inc. and has spent her career working in underserved communities providing nutrition, education, and counseling to individuals with chronic illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension, chronic kidney disease, and HIV and AIDS. Y'all, I know you're at home, but give a round of applause for our special panelists today. Woo! Welcome, y'all. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you? Hello,
I
everyone.
am great. Thank you all for being here with us today.
Hi. Good afternoon, potentially. I'm trying to work out the time differences here. It was good evening for me, but good afternoon to you lot.
All right. Well, let's get into it, you all. I thank you all for being here again. One of my first questions is, can you all explain what is diet culture? Anyone can go first.
We're both being polite.
Yeah,
Okay, I can
I,
call on you.
I,
Make it
I can
cool.
start it off. Diet culture, there's so many definitions to it, but just understanding the overall message that comes with diet culture. But for the most part, it's a system, a belief that, promoting thinness and equating it to health and morality. And also understanding that with diet culture, there's some links to racism, ableism, and classism. So, that promotion of weight loss as achieving a higher status and the beliefs that come with it.
Yeah. And the only thing
Thank
I'd add
you.
to that is also that it enables people to justify behaviors that are particularly harmful in this pursuit of thinness. And it kind of clouds our judgment on things that we would otherwise be, I would argue, probably quite easily able to distinguish as being harmful and bad for us, but actually because it's all justified in this pursuit of being thinner and therefore being more worthy, we end up causing a lot of harm.
Yeah. Well, I'll make it simple. I just think diet culture is just a prison that we're all a part of. All right. Well, we're trying to get out of at least. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Can you our next question, can the desire to lose weight ever be not be associated with diet culture? Let me ask that again. Can the desire to lose weight ever not be associated with diet culture? Can weight loss and the body confidence movement coexist?
Oh, it's hard.
The simple answer would be no, to an extent of depending on where you are in your body confidence movement, body positive movement. But at the end of the day, the intention of weight loss with the harm it does, whether it be what is your reason for pursuing weight loss? Are we pursuing health? Are we pursuing fitness? But at the same time, it may make sense why one is desiring to lose weight due to the system that we live in, the system's oppression that one is fighting for. So is someone losing weight to avoid fat shaming from a provider? Is someone losing weight because they want to feel of worth? Is someone losing weight because they may think they're going to get better medical care or an easier, access to travel on a plane? So it comes down to why one wants to lose weight. But at the end of the day, I would say no, it can't coexist.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'd also say diet culture co-ops these justifications as well. And even if we put aside the losing weight for a visual ideal that we've somehow kind of got within society, even saying, well, actually, no, I want to lose weight because this is about my health, that may also not even be as straightforward as people think that it is, because the messaging that we get from healthcare providers and the messaging we get from the medical community is so steeped in stigma, that actually it's really hard to separate fact from fiction when it comes to these kind of things. And again, saying that, neither of us are saying this with any sort of judgment of people who have chosen to. I went through periods of my life thinking that I couldn't be a good doctor unless I lost weight. So I went through periods of actively essentially going through really harmful behaviors to try and lose weight. And that was due to an all number of different reasons. And I wish I hadn't, but I don't feel, that wasn't necessarily my fault that I felt that way. I'd internalized a lot of the stigma that I'd experienced over my life. And this isn't a thing of judging people just by saying that it doesn't really coexist or can't really coexist with challenging diet culture and rejecting diet culture in all of its forms.
This conversation is a really hot topic, so I'll get a little bit of personal. I've lost a lot of weight before, and people did treat me differently. People who didn't want to be my friend, they decided they wanted to be my friend, but it's all artificial at the same time, right? But I look at my mom. My mom has become an uh, kind of a fitness influencer for a gym, and she has had some like medical success, I guess I would call it that. She's has one less blood pressure pill. um she's had sleep apnea almost all my life. I've been in almost been in car accidents because she's fallen asleep on the road driving. Now I don't know much about it medically, right? But there's a lot of people who say I lost weight and my health changed and I do feel better. What do you say to those people in the community who are saying, but this did change my life?
I mean, I would probably just, again, I'm not here to invalidate anyone's experience, but I would say that there's complexity here that is often missed out of the conversation. And what I mean by that is a lot of the time we will attribute these changes to the weight loss itself, rather than actually looking at, well, what may have changed in your life, right? Like if you've decided that you're, if you found a way of exercising more and you've picked up a new exercise regime and your cardiovascular fitness has improved, which by the way isn't guaranteed to lead to weight loss in any way, shape or form, and your overall health will improve regardless as to what happens on the scales. But if that happens to have led to weight loss at the same time, people will attribute them feeling better, their cardiovascular health being better, to the weight loss, when in fact it's probably the exercise that's done it. And whether they'd have lost weight or not, they probably still would have seen a difference. So there's a lot of missing nuance in some of these conversations where we treat weight loss as the kind of the benefit provider, when actually it may have just been a side effect, right? Weight loss is often just a side effect of things that occur, and sometimes those things can be harmful and sometimes those things can be due to ways that we're taking care of ourselves more, but that's not guaranteed to change our weight in the direction that we think it's going to. And often taking care of ourselves will increase our weight because we've spent so many years of our life under fueling and restricting food, that actually health and weight gain are two things that go together as well. But it's hard for us to think about that and consider that as a fact.
Ooh, that's a good one. Esther?
Yeah, just like Dr. Josh mentioned, we may come in as the experts, but we're not, in control of your body. So if you do choose to have a desire to lose weight, who are we to judge? But at the same time, as he mentioned, some of the times the way we see weight or weight loss is talked about as it was a causation for something. So weight did not cause that chronic illness. Weight might not necessarily help cure that chronic illness too. But as mentioned, like, weight loss is an outcome. What about the behaviors that cause that effect to happen? So we want to focus more on those health promoting behaviors that are happening that led to sudden decrease in weight or possible increase of weight. But as one is dismantling diet culture or following different approaches, we're not guaranteeing that weight loss will happen, nor are we guaranteeing that weight gain will happen, because everyone is different. It's so individualized.
Yeah, and you know what's a much safer way of pursuing health in those kind of situations is actually pursuing the health, not the weight loss. And if the weight loss occurs, fine, whatever. But that's not the goal. And too often that is the goal that we are so fixated on. And some people manage to get away with improving their health by having that goal. But a lot of people will worsen their health with that goal, because it's not a goal that actually leads to very healthy behaviors a lot of the time. And it leads to a lot of harm.
And I'll say for myself, having those goals in the past and also being on strict diets has hindered my mental health. And we sometimes exclude mental health from our physical health, and it all works together. But I want to move us along here. Thank you all for sharing. Meal plans and dietary choices are kinds of diets, but does that mean they are bad? In your expert opinions, is there ever an exception?
I would say yes, there is an exception. I would think first goes to what are we defining as a meal plan and a dietary plan. So if one has a chronic illness such as chronic kidney disease, there is a renal diet that we typically recommend for clients to follow. If someone is with celiac, we do recommend gluten-free. Now, if you are following a gluten-free diet because Kim Kardashian was following it and lost weight and promoted it, then we start to question, well, what was your intention of following that? If you decide to go vegan, not for ethical reasons, but you saw all these celebrities promoting that they went vegan, they lost weight, then we start to question that. So I think there is a time and place for when needing to follow dietary type diet due to a chronic illness, which is usually known for, at least within dietetics, medical nutrition therapy. There is an actual chronic illness of why one's following. But when restriction comes into place that's not needed, or we're doing said diet to achieve a smaller body so we could feel better and it's not necessary, those are type of conversations that need to happen of, well, is this dieting harmful? Is it necessary?
Yeah, I would echo that. It's for me, it's well, what's the purpose? And also, what have you been told is going to happen? Like, have you been sold a lie as to why you've decided to go on this thing? I consider myself to be what I call a nutrition agnostic, which means I believe that there isn't a one diet that fits everyone. It just doesn't exist. And so everyone's going to have different ways of eating that suits them best, that makes them feel best, that makes them feel good, that works with their potential chronic conditions, that works with their lifestyle, that works with their culture, that works with their preferences, their allergies, everything. And so the word diet is just what we end up eating day to day, but we use it in a way that is often linked to weight loss, or often linked to this belief that food is going to cure us of something. And those two things often drive what Esther said as restriction. And that restriction tends to end up being harmful for us. And that tends to actually, in the long run, end up meaning that we're not actually consuming a particularly nutritious diet that we think we are. So yeah, diet, meal plans, and kind of making plans ahead in terms of the kind of foods that we want to include in our diet, in and of themselves, it's not inherently bad, but it's why are you doing it and what have you been told is actually going to happen when you do. And that's the stuff to challenge in my mind.
Yeah, that's a good one. Um, I want to talk a little bit about navigating relationships with physicians. How do I talk to my doctor about weight and weight loss while preserving my body confidence on the journey?
Shall I start with that one? So, it's hard, right? And my general advice when people ask me this kind of stuff is, well, why are we talking about weight loss? What's the actual thing at hand here? What do you actually want? Because most of us most of us go wanting to some help with our health, right? We're wanting some improvement in our health. We're wanting some advice around our health. And a lot of the times we think that weight loss is the answer. But even then, when we're kind of learning to challenge diet culture and we're rejecting some of these thinness ideals, we're going, okay, fine. So weight loss isn't actually what I want, but you go to the doctor with a health query and weight loss is what they prescribe, right?
Mm.
And it is hard. It is so hard to be challenging. And I come from a position here of a lot of privilege of, I've lived and in a larger body in the past, and I've lived in a thinner body in the past. My weight has fluctuated because I've manipulated things over the years that I'm not proud of or happy of. But I've never really struggled in a medical situation myself personally. But I've seen the effects of the way that I've treated patients in the past, before knowing about some of this kind of stuff. And one of the things that I would just like to kind of say that I think is not often talked about is doctors are people too, and they have their own shit. And they are subject to weight stigma. They're subject to diet culture. And it's not fair that they project that stuff from a position of power. It is definitely not fair. But it's also part of the equation. And I think some of that is just a reassurance that when a doctor is talking about weight loss, a lot of the times it's not really about you. It's often about them and the stuff that they're going through and the stuff that they are projecting and the kind of thoughts and ideals that they have because they've lived in the same society we do, right? They just happen to have done a medical degree. They're not special. I'm not special. Like we're just as fallible. And although we should be better at having these conversations about health in a way that doesn't demonize body size, in a way that isn't weight centric, that's the way we're taught it so far. And we're trying to challenge that and trying to work through how this stuff is taught at medical schools, but it's a process.
Esther?
I would also include just being able to have these conversations with doctors or other providers, but knowing that you can, ask not to be weighed if that's the case of not wanting to know where you are on your weight loss journey or just knowing about your weight to begin with. But also, you as a patient, you have the right to ask, how does the number on the scale affecting my treatment? Are you prescribing this same regimen for someone that would have been a smaller body? Those are some things that you want to think about if you do feel as there is some weight bias going on and may cause for shame to not want to go to these medical appointments versus just completely delaying them instead of having to want to have these conversations. So as a patient, as a client, you can advocate for yourself that either you don't want to be weighed, that's not your concern right now, or even question, is my weight being taken right now necessary in my care? And to be able to have those type of conversations.
Always ask
really
why.
important.
I was just going to say, always ask why, right? Doctors and healthcare providers, they should be able to tell you why. And if they are struggling to tell you why, if they can't tell you why straight away off the bat, that's usually quite a good sign that actually this is just weighing you for weighing you's sake. If there's a good reason why, they'll tell you. Be like, oh, well, this particular medication needs a weight for dosing. Okay. Or, oh, well, it's just a tick box on my records here. Well, that's not something I want to do right now. You have every right to have a say in your healthcare, and you have every right to know why something is happening.
I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to share something. One time I went to the doctor's office before I had the language to defend myself. I went to the doctor. I fell off a bike and I hurt myself pretty badly. And I waited a long time to go to the doctor anyway because one of the healthcare costs and a fear of being fat shamed and all those kind of things. And it happened anyway. But I'll make a long story short. I went there. I talked to the physician. I put in a note and said why I was there. They asked you why you're coming to visit today. And when I got in there after being weighed, my doctor spent 30 minutes talking to me about not eating Chinese food. I wasn't seeing it like he didn't ask me what I ate, but he said you need to stop eating Chinese food. I mean, he was giving me all these like lectures. Just it was a ridiculous visit. He opened the door. He had prescribed me a weight loss pill before leaving. He opened the door to leave, and I say, "Hey, you didn't assess me for my leg. What do I do about my leg?" And he said, "Oh," and that just for me, I know that isn't an uncommon thing for a lot of people of size. We experience that with our healthcare providers, focusing so much on our weight and forgetting why we even came to visit the physician in the first place. So I appreciate what you all said. I have my own experience. So for now on, now I don't allow my physicians to talk to me about weight. I don't get on the scale. I do get on the scale after my visit, but not before my visit. But however, based on the way I look, they still kind of bring it up, and then I have to tell them that I don't want to discuss it.
And if there are
Uh,
people listening that don't feel confident enough to do that yet, because I know that can be a lot of people, like that doesn't make you a failure. That doesn't make you weak, right? This is hard. And there are people doing this work on your behalf too. Every time somebody does speak up, it's another challenge to doctors of going, oh, is that a thing? That's oh, okay. And that is something that sticks in people's minds when somebody refuses to be weighed, when someone says, I don't want to talk about my weight right now, it makes a difference. And if you're not ready or able to have those kind of conversations yet, that's okay. That's not your fault. This is hard. This is a position. These are positions of real struggle, and we're working on your behalf. We're fighting for this stuff.
Dr. Josh, thank you for bringing that up. Actually, because the next question is, what are some of the positive changes we're seeing in regards to diet culture, and where is there room for growth, and where can we do better, and what can we do better?
I would say,
Dr. Josh, oh, sorry.
Go on, Esther.
Go
You
ahead.
go. I'll go after.
I would say a positive change is the fact that it's just being talked about, that more people want to dismantle it and, divest from diet culture. Room for growth, I would say, would be just like with anything else, being careful where we receive our information from, who is providing us with this information. So if you're to go on Instagram and put in the hashtag of diet culture, does the same thing come up all the time? Are marginalized identities actually talking about this? Like, who are we learning from? We want to be
Yeah.
able to learn from the marginalized identities that are being oppressed within this system of diet culture. So just being mindful of, it's great to spread the word, but we want to make sure we're actually reaching the marginalized groups and learning from them.
Yeah, massively. And a kind of hopefully a bit of a positive story is that I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of talks with medical students more recently, and hoping to do some more. But actually, just the fact that I'm able to go and talk to medical students about what a relationship with food is, and about disordered eating, and about the harms of prescribing weight loss to patients, and all of those kind of topics that I never had any experience of when I was training to be a doctor. Absolutely none. Just the fact that these things are happening is a massive step, and I have a lot of positive positivity about the next generation of doctors. And I know that doesn't help the current generation, but there's definitely something to look forward to, because you know what, the generation of doctors that are growing up at the moment, they're growing up with a different attitude around things like mental health, with a different attitude around things like stigma and discrimination and being inclusive. And these are such amazing topics that are being talked about, and will have such a beneficial knock-on effect to patient care. And actually, from feeling very disheartened by a lot of this stuff, I've actually got some real kind of positive feelings about it after talking to some of these medical students over the last few months. And so just a bit of good news, I would say, from that kind of stuff.
Yeah, every generation makes it better. I love it. Folks, we have a little bit more time for some questions from the audience. So I have a question for one audience member that says, How do you feel about the BMI and doctors that hyper focus on that?
I mean, the BMI is trash. Can we say that?
Yes, you can.
it's it's a terrible measure that was never designed to be used for health. It was never designed to be used at an individual basis. Like any stats have to be used for the purpose in which they are meant to work. And the BMI works at a population level. It gives you an overall view of rough size of the population. But at an individual level, it's terrible. And we have become far too comfortable at using it at an individual level to justify advice, to label people as unhealthy, to label people as needing some form of weight loss intervention. And it doesn't correlate well with health at all. And it's lazy. Like, it's just proper lazy. Like, we are taught so much more at medical school to be able to assess somebody's health in such amazing ways. And yet we're falling back on a bloody ratio of height and weight. It's so lazy.
Agree. Esther?
I agree. I would also say just knowing the history of BMI and kind of like what Dr. Josh said, it wasn't meant for individuals. It was populations. Also, was only studied in European white males. So all the information we do have, knowing just in regards to the one thing that everyone's using to classify health is that really actually determining health. Whereas we have blood pressure, you can use blood sugar, you can use blood levels, lab work. But why are we so focused on weight? But that same BMI is what's fueling fat phobia and the fear of just everything else that goes on.
Yeah. And leading to discrimination of people when it comes to accessing care, when it comes to accessing things like IVF treatment, when it comes to accessing things like being able to adopt. Like, the list goes on, and it is just uncomfortably inappropriate the way that these things get used.
Yeah. Thank you. I like to say that, like, this is the part of diet culture. We kind of, it impacts people politically, economically, and socially, and that's why I think it's really important that we dismantle it. But I want to take a few more questions from the audience. Um, how do you get your providers to separate weight loss from nutrition? I have a HX of disorderly eating. I don't want to focus on my weight. Any advice?
I would
Any
say
advice?
um, sometimes we might just need to look for a new provider if this is something that comes up all the time. But if one has a history of disordered eating or some disorders, you might be working with a team. So maybe other members on your team can help advocate for you at the same time. But like Dr. Josh mentioned before, it is hard if you don't have that support. But if the focus is on your health versus the weight, that's just a conversation to have. If not, there are more providers now that are, becoming weight inclusive or adopting some weight neutral, approaches to how they deal with health. So it just might be something to consider to looking for a new provider.
And something that I think is also really interesting is exactly what you said. If you have a history of disordered eating, tell them that. Like, this is, this is something that often can shock a healthcare provider and a doctor or a dietitian, or because it's sometimes conversations like that actually are new to them. And saying, look, I have a history of disordered eating and I don't want to focus on weight loss. I don't want to have conversations about it because I know that's going to be harmful to my mental and physical health. But I would love to chat with you about what I can do from a food perspective that is nutrition focused. That conversation, when I was a newbie and ignorant in all of this kind of stuff, that conversation would have made me sit up and be like, oh, that's weird. And I think in addition to that, and the reason why is because we forget that doctors are not the people to go to for nutrition advice. Like, completely seriously, they are not. And we give them far too much credence, and we assume that they know what they're talking about when it comes to food. And the only reason I do is because I've done extra training in it. Like, I've done another degree in nutrition science to be able to talk about this from a position of knowledge. But doctors do not know this stuff. So that's another just point there, that if you're going to your doctor and asking about nutrition advice, I understand why, but they're not really necessarily the best person to be doing that for.
Thank you. We have a few more questions from the audience. Someone said, I have a chronic illness and I really struggle with my body and my diet. There is a lot of information out there and I often feel overwhelmed. Any tips? I think, Esther, earlier you talked about using social media, the hashtag diet culture, and listening to marginalized folks. But are there any other tips that you all have?
I would say also, with as great as the internet is, it can be very overwhelming. Take everything with a grain of salt, understanding where these resources are coming from. It's different whether it's coming from a researcher, a dietitian, or just someone who is talking about their own journey. If one is still seeking help, I would say reach out to that type of provider, whether it be a dietitian, a therapist. Those are licensed, trained professionals that can help you. Because at the same time, everything on the internet is not individualized. Everyone has their own, history, background, and things that a provider would need to also know what else is going on. So it's great to get information on the internet. However, it can be very overwhelming. So the best advice, if accessible, being able to look out for a licensed professional or at least a support group.
Yeah, although support groups are sometimes sometimes the worst disseminators of some of this misinformation, but meaning well, but very well meaning, but unfortunately can often be a bit of an interesting minefield. A couple of things that I personally like to say when people ask me this kind of stuff is just a couple of kind of plumb lines to hold. Is one, unless you're allergic to something, if they're telling you to go on a diet that's incredibly restrictive, if that's the advice you're coming across, it's restricting a whole food group or it's restricting a whole macronutrient, you can almost definitely throw that away. Like, unless you've got celiac disease, you don't need to be cutting gluten out of your life. And a lot of the diets that you will come across on the internet will do that. And secondly, the second one is just if it's promising a cure. Diets don't cure you, because diets very rarely are the cause of your problems. And if it's claiming to be a cure and it's the way that it's selling you that is through restriction, those are two pretty good signs that you should be steering well clear of whatever that is.
And my tip is to follow Dr. Josh and Esther Tambe so you can reach out to them for additional resources. There's so much information on their social media accounts. I want to get to another question. How do you separate diet culture from good nutrition?
I think the
Is it
question
possible?
I think the question is, what is good nutrition? And this goes back to kind of what diet culture is when we start to moralize good or bad, and we, elevate one over another. So is good nutrition being able to take in adequate amount of fiber? Is good nutrition being properly hydrated? So that alone, I think, is imploring to explore more about what do we consider good nutrition. So I think that's also very individualized because everyone's goals will be different on what they see as nutrition. But if you just want to, for depending on what space you are, for maybe someone with disordered eating or an eating disorder, adequate nutrition, just being able to know that they're eating enough in a day, it would be quote unquote good nutrition. So I think that's very individualized, but it also has some morality there, which is something that we want to try to stem away from when talking about food, nutrition, health, good or bad.
Yeah, and also, is there, a lot of this kind of stuff is why. So what is it being sold as? So like if you're coming across something that is talking about getting more veg into your life and you want to know, is that good nutrition or is that diet culture? Why are they telling you to get more veg? Are they telling you to get more veg because they're saying it's going to result in weight loss? Right? Or are they telling you to get more veg because it's got fiber and it's really good for your gut and it's got lots of nutrients in it and we know it's really good for health? Like, that's one thing, and claiming that you should eat a certain way because it's going to change how you look or it's going to cure something, that's another. But it is hard. This stuff is this stuff is a bit of a minefield. But if it's promising and it's too good to be true, good nutrition's not sexy, but that's okay, right? If it's weird, sexy advice that you're coming across, it's probably nonsense.
And something I like, this conversation is making me think about Fannie Lou Hamer. Not all fat people are well fed. And I think good nutrition is just food, having access to food. And a lot of physicians, I think, miss that. The community work part of making sure the people that you are serving in your areas actually have access to food. I've been judged at the doctor's office sometimes, and I didn't even have food. And so I like to bring that into the conversation also. We all can play a part in that. But we have a little bit more time left, and I want to ask y'all a few more questions. What do you think the relationship is between appearance, mental health, and pain disorders?
What's a big question? Yeah. I mean, appearance and mental health. I mean, there are some big links there because of the way that society treats people that look a different way, right? So if you're subject to discrimination and stigma, that has a huge impact on your mental health, a massive impact. And we shouldn't be downplaying that at all. And actually, it's something that often gets left out of the equation when we're talking about weight and supposed health risks and things like that. We often ignore the impact of being subject to weight stigma for that many years. So that's definitely a factor there. In terms of pain disorders, I think that's a really complex topic in regards to things like chronic pain and mental health. And I don't think that's something that I could adequately give any sort of advice on in this kind of platform, unfortunately.
Esther?
I would agree with Dr. Johnson in regards to what I can speak on, which would be the weight stigma part, and appearance and mental health. Just knowing that the psychological consequences of weight stigma is decrease in self-esteem, increase in substance abuse behaviors, suicidal thoughts. So it's known that it plays a role on our mental health when one is consistently shamed due to the way they look. There's research that talks about that.
Well, that is the end of our segment. I just want to say thank you both, Dr. Josh, Esther Tambe, for coming in today and talking to us about diet culture. My name is Danny, also known as I'm a Pound Cake Online. It's been a pleasure. You all, it's going to take a few more minutes and you're going to see the panel writing on the mirror with Sarah Nicole Landry. So we'll be back. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.